Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our webinar. At the end of the year, we're going to have a collaborative look at what 2025 taught us and where we're going in 2026. My name's Fersht. I'm the CEO Chief Analyst at HFS, and joining me are my colleagues Saurabh Gupta, who's our President of Advisory and Research, and Dana Dahea, who's our Executive Research Leader. So let's get moving. Okay, everyone's muted, by the way, so we're going to try and keep this as collaborative as possible for today's session. So send in your little Q&As into the chat box up at the top of your screen, and we'll attempt to get to many of your questions as we go ahead. So, all right, and a little bit about us at HFS. We just make out the builds. We did a lot of shaping of the narrative. We're very famous in 2012 for launching the first analyst report that defined the RPA, robotic process automation industry, which actually set a lot of the narrative for where we are today with Agentic and the future of AI. As a service economy, and then digital one office preceded that. One office was very apt because it was all about bringing together the front and back offices to drive and satisfy customers and partners with common goals and outcomes. And many of the ideals of one office have really rung true today more than ever. And we're actually bringing a lot of these concepts back into the narrative as we move into next year. And then more recently, we coined something called services as software, which really has defined a lot of where the industry is going. It's about converging and blurring of the lines between the worlds of software and services, and really rethinking how companies are moving into an AI-first environment and thinking about partnering for outcomes, partnering for scale and intelligence, as opposed to just sort of buying effort and tasks from service providers. Let's move on. And as you can see, when everybody starts to use stuff you've coined, we felt the need to trademark the term, which we managed to do earlier this year. So we defined the market. Some numbers here, I'm not going to go through all of them, but we like to give practical advice and not theory, grounded in real work with clients. We really try and not just advise, but we try and influence the market. Our goal is to be the most influential advisory firm at the intersection of services and software. We have a one council of over 250 enterprise leaders who help shape our research, who contribute to some of the work that we do, share their learnings and understandings, and help shape our agenda. And we really try and ground insight from the thousands of enterprises that we are surveying over the course of the year. And on top of that, we love being global. We just opened an office in the Middle East to go with our presence in India and in Europe, as well as North America. And, for a mid-sized research firm like us, this is a fantastic time to cover a market where there is so much going on. There's something to write about every single day, it seems. It's not like pandemic where everything's slowed right down and all we seem to talk about was how to work in a remote environment. Today, we are going through unprecedented change in the industry. So what did 2025 teach us? Firstly, I think enterprises lost patience with these legacy models. And you can see here, going from BPO and traditional IT service contracts and even SaaS contracts, you can see close to 3/4 of services firms are looking to renegotiate and look to renegotiate in 2025, and then 6 out of 10 software and SaaS vendors. There's a shift away from overpriced services, a shift away from bloatware, and moving on to much more dynamic areas of the market. Next slide. And I just wanted to talk briefly about something that we launched recently, and it's called the HFS AI First Deal Lab. And it's really about helping enterprises and service providers break out of the old sort of strangleholds of an outsourcing model, where contracts are beset by RFP drag, what we call deck theater, the wrong incentives, a lot of change friction. Like whenever there's a change in a contract, why is everything so painful and requires a change order, that sort of thing. And what we're working on with multiple clients, and this is both on the enterprise side as well as the provider side, is having a more pressure testing workshop approach. We do more co-design and optimization, and then a 100-day AI readiness plan. I mean, when you think about it, we're moving into uncharted territory with many of these technologies. We're starting to see big deals going down which have major agentic components, some involving thousands of employees, and the agentification of these businesses over phased 3-year plus contracts. And a lot of this is trying to figure out what can we learn from the past to frame something for the future that drives common outcomes and common incentives and the ability to scale intelligence as we go into this uncharted territory. Next slide. So 2025 delivered one of the biggest AI booms we've ever really seen. And, just some of the numbers are incredible, like ChatGPT became the 5th most visited website globally, 5.8 billion visits. We've now seen Google just steamroll into the space as well because of their massive control over enterprise search and presence, and their ability to basically give their service away for free to many of their corporate users and then start charging through advertising. They're already doing it now. AI deal value surged, so AI-related transactions increased 120% year on year. And then other things from our research we've seen across the Global 2000 has been services as software emerging as a $1.5 trillion potential market. We are seeing Gen AI investments growing at 32%. Enterprises directing 7% of their total tech spend to Agentic, and Agentic itself surging at 38% in 2026, which is even faster than Gen AI, which is not to be confused with Agentic. So moving into 2026, a few things that we really learned in 2025. AI became the default interface for work. It became the next operating model, services as software. I think AI did it, and then we'll talk more about this as we go along, but it really became the corporate belly fat alibi for cutting staff as well. It's not all positives that came out of what we're seeing with AI in terms of an excuse to reduce people, and also an excuse to not hire entry-level staff as well. And, as we get into next year, I think a lot of more responsibility is going to be discussed, sobriety as well around AI, because this is having profound impacts on society and then, stop eating our young. It's like companies trying to sort of pull back on adding young talent because they feel they can just get what they want through software. So we're going into a different time where I think we need to be very responsible and very sober around how we approach the market. Geopolitics dominated corporate strategy in 2025. It's the number one area that's on the minds of enterprise leaders as they pursue their strategies. It's like they're looking at the instability around them, And as we look at the impact of the Trump era tariffs, the one thing, next slide, that you can really see here is the focus around automation and AI and sovereignty. So a lot of businesses have just decided, look, there's a lot of uncertainty. We can't tell from one month to the next what prices we're spending, what new regulations are being rolled out, what restrictions are happening. So let's focus on the one thing that is a sure bet, and that's our data infrastructure, our workflow, and the way that we're thinking about the solidity of operations so we can do automation, so we can use AI and exploit the technology in a much better way than we've done in the past. And I mean, I was even impressed with the IBM Confluent deal yesterday, which is starting to see sensible acquisitions where they're looking at thinking, how do we build the data infrastructure for the future of the AI organization, rather than just obsessing around large language models and these things, which are kind of already fleshing out into the market. So, slide. So Saurabh, do you want to talk a bit about what we're seeing from a perspective on the shift towards services as software?
Absolutely, Phil. And look, I've been in this business now for donkey's years, and I've never seen a chart like this where we are not just augmenting our services with new toys and new toolkits, but we are absolutely looking at replacing people-led services. You know, if you look at the left-hand side chart, 8 out of 10 enterprises are saying we are either planning to or replace some of our people-led services with AI-led solutions. And, you know, practically everybody is going to get impacted. The top of line is our wonderful contact center services. You know, why do you need thousands of people to take calls from your customers when you can have always first in line kind of a contact center with AI if this actually materializes? But we are seeing across the board, you know, finance and accounting, cybersecurity, every place that we look at, AI is having a significant impact on replacing people-led services, labor arbitrage-led services today.
Yeah, and
Phil, do you want to talk about? Sorry, go on.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks. Here we go. Here we go. So this is data we took across 979 Gen AI and Agentic live pilots and production scenarios. And what is fascinating here is all those on the left-hand side, you can see who are in pilot phase. Companies are going in with this mindset of they want more productivity, better speed, efficiency, scale. It's almost like the old mindset of how do we save money and do things more efficiently, less focus on what we call the other P's of prediction, personalization, and performance. When those companies move into a production scenario, suddenly the focus on productivity goes way down and the focus on personalization, prediction, and performance goes way up. Now, it's not because suddenly productivity wasn't important, it suddenly becomes hygiene, because this is the new way of operating. Everything is slicker, faster. We can get things done better, maybe with less people. The technology is no longer the thing to blame. It's now how do we move faster? And I do think, you know, this gives us a lot of excitement for the future in that, you know, while right now we're probably in a lot of a productivity mindset with AI, as we get more into a production mindset, the focus then shifts to things that humans do better, which is being predictive and gaining a competitive edge and not just focusing on productivity.
And I think Phil, if I may add, I think we are becoming too obsessed with just operational cost reduction and headcounts, and I think we are underselling AI to our boards and our C-level if we just are focused on cost reduction, because I think the bigger power, as this chart shows, is in predictive capabilities of AI, is in personalization of AI, you know, customer experience, employee experience. It's in business outcomes or performance. And I think all of us have seen so many business cases, Phil, this year, and all of them are so focused on productivity, cost reduction, operational headcount reduction, that sometimes I feel we are missing the bigger picture in this thing. And I think this is when I fear are we going down the RPA rat hole again? Because that's how that whole market collapsed, because everybody was looking at, can we save a dime here or a dime there, versus looking at the bigger picture.
Here we go. And I think this piece of data maybe was the defining piece of information from our research we pulled out last year, but it was simply the technology is no longer the thing to blame when things go wrong. It's now much more around process in particular, and all the things around the AI that need to be fixed to make it work more effectively, and fixing those fragmented workflows, better cross-departmental collaboration, better governance, and having more clear strategic direction is really taking over. And when we look at what we term as tech debt, which would hit $2 trillion, I think McKinsey number was, and Gartner, some of these people, we actually think that tech debt's really going to be less than process debt, data debt, and people debt. So $10 trillion of debt, that's what we think is happening. That's conservative across the global 2000. And the process area is the one area that really does need fixing a lot more than some of these other areas of the business. So one of the things which I think is really critical, and this is fascinating what's happening, is we call this the AI velocity gap. And as individuals, we're free to experiment. We have tolerance for imperfection. We want immediate ROI and benefit. We want to be able to experiment rapidly. And we can do all of that. We can connect our Gmail and our calendar. We can go in and get tax advice. We can save on routine tasks, and we're unafraid to experiment. And as individuals, so many of us are becoming so much more empowered by these tools, and then we go into the workplace, and it's a very, very different experience. There's data stuck in just different ERP apps or systems of record. There's so much tribal knowledge in the enterprise that's just living in email chains and process workflows, and it's not documented. And so why is it that we've learned how to run our jobs and a lot of our personal lives so much more effectively, and then we go to work and it's like, it's a terrible experience for a lot of people. It's like, I can't get anything done. Marketing doesn't sit down with sales. HR doesn't sit down with finance. Everything's still living in different repositories of data. And, if you're like a augmented, empowered individual who's really living by AI, you're not going to want to work for some of these companies anymore. You're going to want to go work somewhere that does get it, is more slick and nimble, and can get things done faster. So overcoming this gap, I think, is absolutely critical. And then when we, see this focus around still doing things in the old way, where it's just thousands of people trying to process tasks versus let's think about what we're trying to achieve here as an organization and make workplace such a more empowered environment for individuals. I think it's absolutely critical. Now, I know, Dana, you're an anthropologist by nature. What's your view a bit on the current state of the workplace based on your research, and whether this gap is closing or not from many of the conversations you're having?
Yeah, I think there's a very big workforce challenge that's going to be more apparent in 2026. We've talked about this technology evolving and people are adopting tools, but we're forgetting constantly the humans that are actually part of this and leveraging these capabilities. So I imagine the gap becomes bigger unless we begin to address it now as well. So that means addressing the workforce concerns. A lot of people are scared about their jobs, what it means for them. It's going to shape, how you actually do the work and how you engage with others as well, and how these tools will impact your work on a daily basis. So it requires a lot of thought from leadership at this moment to prepare for that environment. And that's a big challenge for 2026 as well. We need to close that gap quickly.
And that sort of takes us to where we're heading over the course of the next year beyond. And we really see this like triumvirate now of AI technologies that are changing the corporate game. And, you know, we talk about Agentic, which is really the orchestrator. It's where workflows are managed, compliance is driven. LLMs have really become the accelerator, which provide reasoning, code generation, a great knowledge interface. The other area that is starting to emerge is vibe coding, which is really about turning intent into working agents. And you know, when you think that when you look at Y Combinator, which is probably the number one confederation of startups, 95% of them are now using vibe coding within their production. And then you get into some of these large enterprises where you still have a lot of trepidation and nervousness about using vibe coding. But this is where non-technical staff are actually sitting down with technical developers and working together on redesigning the process. So looking at that velocity gap, this is how you close it. It's thinking, what do we want to achieve with our people strategy? How do we have marketing turning into a real sales-driven engine for this business? How do we get the mindset right across all these different parts of the company? And it's by redesigning work, rethinking roles and process, all these types of things. And vibe coding has a big role to play as we move into that type of environment. And we're even starting to see what I like to describe as the chief AI officer. It might not have been as prevalent as the chief automation officers of past years and things like that. But, you know, as we look at what this role should entail, it's, you know, looking at how do we do the challenges of implementation, how do we align strategically, to how do we become an AI first enterprise. And then these are the facets of this role. And I see this role becoming more and more prominent now, where you need that technical credibility. You need to have process intelligence. You've got to be a mentor who can build trust and drive education. Like with all these individuals running around your company who've generally empowered themselves, how do you start to share that empowerment with each other to say, I've discovered I'm doing it this way, not that way. I can get this done much faster using this tool, not that tool. Or have you tried doing this particular process? This is where we're really shifting with a lot of this now, is suddenly people's use of AI is no longer their dirty little secret. It's something to actually be quite proud of. This is how I'm doing my job better and more effective. And I'm not hoarding this capability anymore. I'm sharing it, because the more I share, the better I get. And so building out, you know, defined privacy, ethics, and guardrails. I love dusting off the old term centers of excellence, but these ring absolutely true in this market, where we've got to build cross-functional teams and frameworks if we're truly going to be effective, one, with these organizations, and two, having a dedicated C-suite executive who is working across the CIO, the CFO, the CHO, and everyone to really pull this together. And this person, we're starting to see them really come alive in a lot of maybe Global 2000 organizations in a way that we hadn't seen before. And I really think this role is going to become more and more prominent in the next 12 months.
So as we look at all that, Phil, you just described, I think we are seeing frustration with the current services and software model, you know, with 75% of the clients saying we want to renegotiate our deals at the end of term. And not just with services, with software as well. You know, that number was about 60%. We are seeing a lot of economic volatility, macroeconomic volatility. And I think right now people are just putting their bets on AI. And we are seeing finally a new value equation being created based on what you just described, Phil. And that's why we came up with this concept of services as software, because I think the lines between what we've traditionally described as services and what we've traditionally described as software are blurring. And I think there is a new model that we all want, whether you're a service provider, a technology provider, or a client of services and technologies, where the delivery model is not just sort of my workflow is the best workflow, or if you want to deliver anything, you need to have armies of people to do it. I think it is possible in today's market to go into AI-driven autonomous workflows. Customization is a big, big problem, with every software that you implement. Every software company tells you, my workflow is what you need to adopt. And if you want to customize anything, by the way, you need to go to these service providers and they're going to charge you $1 million to do anything. I think with services as software, with AI-led solutions, that problem starts to get addressed. Pricing continues to be an issue. We continue to pay for presence, not performance, to our service providers. Software pricing continues to be on a per-seat feature-based pricing. Where is the performance? Where is the outcomes? Where is the innovation? And I think you have to pay for what you get, what you want. And I think our pricing structures need to evolve. And the biggest thing perhaps is adaptability. Businesses are changing very fast. Industry lines are blurring. Every industry that you look at is going through a sea of change of how to change to and adapt to these models, and the business models are changing. You can't afford to have a service or a software which takes a year to implement. By that time, your business has changed, and that's why you need dynamic, more real-time business models. And I think that's where this whole thing that we introduced last year called services as software has really picked up. And what we forecast is that this is going to be a $1.5 trillion opportunity that is going to absorb revenue from both traditional services and traditional software companies. This is almost a net new category that's emerging in our world, and we've seen tons of traction from investors, from enterprises, from service providers, from technology providers. And look, that $1.5 trillion is actually a conservative estimate, because that's based on the services and softwares that we today see in the B2B world. There could be new applications of this concept of services as software. We don't know what other avenues can we unlock through this. So this is, for us, or for me personally, I think services as software is really come along in a big, big way. But despite all the noise, the hype, all the opportunities that we have, 2025 at the end of the day was also defined by tension. Phil talked about geopolitics, tariffs, economic uncertainty. Is inflation high or low? Employment, our employment for young graduates is perhaps higher than ever. Phil articulated the AI velocity gap. Everybody, all of us have a brilliant Sunday experience when we are looking at our chat GPTs and lying down on our sofas on Sunday. But then as soon as we get into Monday, you get into, the same old SharePoint where you can't access anything. And then the workforce anxiety as well is huge, and so this is not just hunky dory. We have a lot of potential that AI has unlocked for us, but there is still a lot of tension in the system, both as individuals and as companies. Dana, you did this research recently. Why don't you talk about what you found here? Because while there's this $1.5 trillion picture that we paint, the reality is that very few have been able to capture that.
Yeah, so we did this study. We surveyed Fortune 2000 companies, and we looked at their agentic maturity across different dimensions, including their deployment, their data readiness, change management, everything that kind of captures maturity holistically. We found that less than 7% of organizations are actually pioneering with agentic AI. So they have enterprise-wide deployments, they have governance and orchestration, and they have a lot of monitoring practices, and they have a workforce that is ready and excited to kind of deploy these tools too. So we've had that slide. But for the most part, and even this was a bit of a stretch too. This was just on the cusp. There's so much more to do within this agentic maturity stage too. But the rest of the organizations are struggling. They're struggling to move projects beyond pilots. They're struggling to get their workforce on board. And really what we found as well was that when you have a lower maturity organization, the fears and concerns are bigger, and that impacts your processes. It impacts the way that you're able to deploy these tools more effectively. And I actually want to go to some of the comments and questions too that kind of ask some of this too. So we had a question around the ROI. So for instance, those in the pioneering stages are actually looking at their ROI metrics very differently than those in the early stages. So they're not hyper-focused on productivity. They're looking at, the experiences of individuals. They're looking at the impacts towards their revenue. They're not focusing purely on efficiency. Let's see, there's some more questions here. So given the need to lean into Agentic, how to articulate the business benefits, that's also very critical too. Organizations in early maturity are struggling to articulate those benefits. They don't know how to get that past, their own departments. They don't know how to communicate the value and the meaning of these capabilities beyond this. And that's the big struggle. So there's a lot of things that organizations are struggling with. And that's kind of why next year is so critical too, is we need to figure out how do we actually move past this low maturity phase. And that requires a lot of effort in kind of looking at your entire organizational structures, your leadership practices, and everything else too. So this is kind of another example too around what I was mentioning around the workforce. But we asked enterprises how they characterize employee sentiments. As I mentioned, higher maturity organizations had much more positive experiences with their employees around the leveraging of agentic AI. But 60% of organizations overall have a negative or neutral perspective. And that's very dangerous in this environment. Those people are going to be leveraging these tools and making them actually work in your enterprise. And we need to move to a model where we're actually bringing employees on board with these efforts. Next slide. But one big thing we learned from this year is that it also gave us a bold ambition to reinvent how work gets done. Unanimously across almost all of our studies, we find that people are actually thrilled about these tools. They're not scared, at least from the ambition aspect. We believe that they can actually fundamentally change how work gets done in the organization. But now, 2026, we're moving into, is time to turn that ambition into something real. That's where I'll let Saurabh kind of speak to that.
Can I just pipe in, because I got a... Oh, I'm sorry. I'm just going to pipe in, but I got a question which probably leads into the how to AI, Saurabh, and I know you're in a unique position to answer this. And this comes in from one of our listeners today, which is, given the need to lean into agentic, how do you articulate the business benefits case for something still under development? And I know you're working on a couple of engagements in this area right now. How do you do it? How are you calculating the business case?
So Phil, and I think that's a fantastic question. So first of all, you have to recognize that the business case cannot just be about cost reduction. And I think the best way that we've realized by having so many conversations with enterprises is to use a balanced scorecard approach. Create a balanced scorecard across the 4 Ps. Phil, that you remember the slide that you had on the 4 Ps of productivity is important. Make it a part of the business case, but don't make it the only point in the business case. Look at what you can drive with predictiveness. How can you take care of, what about all this tariff? Is it going to go up or down? Can you create digital twins of your supply chain? Can you predict? Predictive capabilities of AI should be a part of that business case. Personalization should be a big part of the business case. Are you gonna able to drive your NPS scores up or down? Can you improve your employee experience up or down? That has to be a part of the business case. And then business outcomes or performance has to be a part of the business case. So I think what we are seeing is organizations that are taking a mature, balanced scorecard approach. We can help some of these clients where we can help you develop some of these balanced scorecards across those 4 Ps. That's a mature business case that you can actually realize. And that's not short selling by just saving a couple of heads here and there, because frankly, what I have seen is some of these cost saving related business cases don't materialize, because a lot of what AI is doing is helping what I call fractional FTEs. They're not ripping and replacing the entire roles. They're taking parts of your jobs and helping you do those better, faster. And those fractional FTEs are very hard to realize on the bottom line. So I think our best advice, Phil, is to take a balanced scorecard approach across those 4 Ps to create those business cases.
Terrific.
But that leads me to, we are developing our entire research agenda for next year on how to AI. And I think there is a lot of tension in this market. On one hand, you look at the valuations of AI-led companies. One of my favorite financial metrics is this price to sales ratio. I stopped looking at price to earnings because nobody has earnings anymore. So price to sales is probably a better ratio. To look at the historical average of good, well-performing companies on the S&P 500 is 2.5. If you look at the worst performing AI-led stocks, that price to sales ratio is over 15. Some people like Palantir, etc., is crazy higher than 15 also. But you see the bubble that's being created already. It's almost 6 to 10 times the average strong price to sales ratio that we see. So the investors are pumping huge amounts of money into AI valuations. But on the other hand, what Dana presented, only 7% of the organizations have enterprise-wide agentic deployment. You look, we've sliced and diced this data through I don't know how many studies this year. The answer is the same. There are less than 10% of the organizations who are able to take AI into production. So there is a valuation bubble, but there is an ice age almost on execution. And the reason behind that is how to AI. Nobody knows how to realize those valuations by executing against them. And I think the how to AI is the missing link between AI valuations and enterprise adoption. Investors are treating the potential of AI as if it was performance, but we all know performance is far from that. And I think that's why, as a research and an advisory firm, we are really doubling down on advising our clients, whether you're an investor, a service provider, a technology provider, or an enterprise, on how the hell do you marry these two things. These can't work in isolation, because 2026 will be a make or break year. We'll see that bubble being burst, or we'll see the enterprise adoption see a hockey stick, because both things cannot happen simultaneously. We cannot live in a world where there is such a distracted dystopian viewpoint on valuations versus performance. The other way to look at this is, I think the why AI is very, very clear. It's crystal clear today. The people-driven model, as we've been talking through this whole session today, is out of gas. OECD, I was looking at some of the OECD numbers, the global productivity increases are stuck at below 1%. Not just in our industry, but everywhere else. We cannot drive more productivity out of the current models. There is a huge opportunity. We've been talking about this $1.5 trillion services as software target addressable market that AI has unlocked. And as we mentioned, 8 out of 10 clients are looking at replacing some of their people-led services with a AI-led model. So the why is very clear. Honestly, the what is very clear as well. The what is emerging. The technology is there or thereabouts. This is not a technology question. When we started the year, people were worrying about hallucinations. Hallucinations have gone down by 30 to 50%. Reasoning accuracy has gone up 5x this year. Task success by agentic AI has gone from 15 to 60%. The inference costs have come down. You look at any metric on technology performance, it has grown exponentially. So the technology is there or thereabouts. Where we are struggling is the how. How do you get there? And that continues to be a black hole, because from strategy to execution, it's just not working. The question that Phil, you just asked, how to build a practical AI business case. It is complicated. It is not a slam dunk. The other question again, the slide that Phil presented, how to get AI ready. Our research indicates that for every $1 that you spend on AI, you probably have to spend $3 on data and probably $5 on getting your processes reworked. If we are living in a hugely debted enterprise world, and there is a limit to how much you can borrow on your credit cards. At some point of time, you have to pay your credit card bills. And then we don't know how to buy and sell these things. We don't know how to structure AI first relationships. I've been joking where the whole IP for outsourcing contracts was created in the 1990s. And we are still using those same ways of pricing these things, structuring contracts, relationships, SLAs. We've added a few bells and whistles, but fundamentally, we've not changed that. We don't know how to buy and sell AI. And I think till we solve these hows, that valuation versus performance will be a big, big gap. And I really wanted to talk about, this is a leaky bucket of AI ambitions. We all have big, big AI ambitions, but these ambitions are leaking away. And that's why, hardly 1 out of 10 AI enterprises successful in getting AI into production. Because first of all, let's be honest, agentic washing is ripe. Every RPA company is now an AI company. Every company is an AI first company. How is that possible? With cost reduction, the business cases are fixated on headcount. Phil talked about this. We have huge issues with data debt, process debt, technology debt, and people debt. Our people are not ready. They are scared of it. Our data is not ready. We have a lot of data, but AI is not some magic pill that will transform your data. You have to do it. Our processes are not ready. We've been doing the same thing over and over again, maybe slightly better, slightly cheaper, slightly faster, but that is not transformation. And we have huge amounts of technical debts. At some point of time, we have to pay for that. The ecosystem is also changing. All of you who are enterprises on this webinar, you know how to deal with data providers, you know how to deal with ERPs, you know how to deal with infra providers, and you know how to deal with the likes of Salesforce, Workday, etc. You don't know how to structure relationships with OpenAI. You don't know how to structure relationships with tons and tons of startups that are coming in every day. You don't know how to structure AI first deals. Even though you want to do this, I absolutely abhor the concept of digital labor. What does that even mean? It's almost like we are trying to buy DVDs and buying streaming services, paying for DVDs while buying streaming services. It's just bizarre, some of the ways that we are doing this. So how to AI is very, very important. Is how do you build a practical AI business case? How do you actually get AI ready to be able to use these technologies? And how do you structure AI first relationships? Honestly, this is going to be the focus for HFS for the entire of 2026. We're going to get into more practical AI conversations. We know the why is very clear. We know the what is emerging. I think if we can move this needle in collaboration with all of you here, I think we would have done this world some service. Phil already talked about that, but with that, Dana, let me hand over to you, because we've been polling our entire research organization on what are the big trends that we see coming into 2026.
Yeah, we want to really understand what's kind of actually happening. The first one is deal making will be re-engineered for the services and software economy. This is exactly what Saurabh was speaking about, but it's really changing how we're actually buying these services as well. Not only just how we engage with them, but what does it actually look like from the models in which we procure, traditional IT services. We're shifting away from this human labor to actually technology-driven labor too. The next one, agentic platforms and business systems will break the ERP mold. So the rise of agentic platforms and modular business kind of systems are marking a beginning of the end of monolithic ERP era processes. So new architectures will shape how enterprises are designing and consuming services too. So we're seeing a shift there as well. A continuation of tariffs, localization, and sovereignty will rewire global delivery. This was a very big year of a lot of geopolitical tensions that are happening. And this is kind of a continuation of that. We're going to continue to see tariffs, visa restrictions, and these aspects that are reshaping kind of nearshore and offshore strategies and our compliance models too. So we're going to have to kind of build greater resilience for how we begin to, work across regions. Security and liability will escalate in AI world. So we know that, as we bring on more of these tools, it's going to create a lot more threats for us too that we need to begin to prepare for. So enterprises will need to kind of greater governance and security models and clarity around accountability. The GCC provider divide is collapsing, so enterprises will build capabilities in-house and partner externally for speed, innovation, and creating shared models of ownership and outcomes as well. So we're going to see that kind of really thriving this year too. This is my favorite topic, but the human AI operating model becomes the next frontier of design. The shaping of how we actually work, how we begin to structure ourselves is significantly changing, and we just start preparing for that immediately. We cannot just kind of bring in these capabilities and assume that the world and our work will remain the same. We're going to see continuation commoditization of new entrants and new systems too. So OpenAI, hyperscalers, Google, as kind of Phil mentioned, are reshaping our markets completely and compressing a lot of value chains as well. So this shapes our entire systems of thinking about how we procure services and how we work together too with these systems. Democratization of AI capabilities and the rise of vibe coding. Phil mentioned this too, but employees will be building their own agents and workflows and speeding innovation while changing. It's going to be challenging a lot of our governance and control systems too, but we're going to have a lot more people being able to actually build things themselves. And that's going to be a change, again, in the way that we work. Critical mass will build for energy. So enterprises will continue to operationalize sustainability. We're going to see this continue, but progress will be slow and quiet. We're no longer going to see kind of this massive push towards this, but it will be underneath everything. And we're going to continue focusing on energy transition. That'll be very critical to not let us lose sight of that. And the last one is that physical AI will reshape real world operations. So while today's AI mostly sits behind screens, physical AI is emerging. This is a big trend that will kind of be coming forward. So we're going to see falling hardware costs, maturing foundational models, and acute labor shortages will converge to make kind of these thinking robots that are commercially viable as well. So those are the top 10 trends.
Phil, do you want to talk about your favorite topic?
Yeah, and I'd also like to combine it with a question we've had around this role of the Chief AI Officer, and is it being set up for success? And this ties in a lot to building out talent. That when you look at leadership values and behaviors, I don't think they've changed. I just think it's now being accentuated more. You just need to be a better leader in an organization. And you need to focus on things like deep listening, being able to understand people's underlying issues, perspectives, uphold accountability, and make people really take ownership of outcomes. Have calm optimism. So make your environment psychologically safe for your team and your colleagues and everybody. Experiment yourself, show your own vulnerability, explain how you're learning as well as everybody else's. And we can be individuals who screw up, who aren't afraid to try new things, but you have to have this learnability culture that you drive into your company. Now, I've seen some people fail spectacularly in this role, and I've seen others who are starting to become successful because they're learning leadership skills that they probably should have been demonstrating before AI really hit hard 3 years ago. How do you amplify others and really recognize and empower contributions, navigate different styles, and adapt communication to how different people work? Be a great communicator. It's more important than ever. Break out of these soulless, insipid work environments where there's a lot of people working remotely who are communicating over text and things all the time, and really bringing back the workplace and seeking feedback constantly. So I don't think things are changing that dramatically in terms of how you become a great AI leader. You just need to be great at leading, listening, adapting, and creating psychologically safe environments. And we've been pretty vocal about what's happening with young talent. You've seen a lot of consulting firms, for example, using AI as the big excuse for, hey, we don't need as many entry-level people next year. We're going to pull back a bit on graduate talent. That's, I think, a terrible mistake to make, because they create the culture. They're native to technology developments. None of this is new to them. If you go onto our website, you'll see we just did a podcast with Ed Elson, who's one of the Prof G's sidekick. He's a 26-year-old successful New Yorker. But he said his age group is terrified right now of losing jobs to AI. That's not a good thing in society. And I think this is going to become a big conversation point next year, because we have a duty to create opportunities for young people. We need to lean into both young tech and AI talent, or our business is just going to become literally a sort of soulless, software-driven organization. So building a culture and identity is very, very important. Creating a meaning to work for your firm. And, there's a lot of people here who are in and around services, GCCs, service providers, and large enterprise. Is really bringing back that sort of cadetship model of, bringing in young talents, getting them to work with more experienced talent. Now, me and Saurabh, for example, when we started out in the workplace 20 years ago, or in my case, probably 30 years ago, we didn't have access to all the information that kids do today. Right? They have access to everything. They probably know more than people like we do. They just don't have the emotional maturity and the experience and the networking and people skills that we've developed over the years. And so building out those hybrid teams, driving strong leadership traits across young, mid-career, late career people is really, really, really important. It's something that we really believe in and cultivate at HFS. Thank you. So this has been a terrific conversation. Sorry, I had a few glitches at the beginning. My fault, actually, but I hope I'll make it up to everybody. Maybe I can finish up with one learnability comment that both Saurabh and Dana have taken from today's conversation. What's the one thing that maybe you have thought about doing this webinar that you hadn't thought about before?
Dana, you want to go first?
What's one thing I've thought about? I'm still very much interested in the kind of the human element. That's kind of always my focal point too. I think 2026 will be a very big year to focus on humans in all of this too. That's kind of the most exciting aspect. And I'm seeing it much more as well as we begin to plan for the future and thinking about the younger generation coming into the workforce as well. All these different aspects tells us that there's this big piece of the pie that we've been kind of neglecting as we get so hyped up and excited about, the technology capabilities. We need to kind of bring them back into the loop. Saurabh?
Yeah, and for me, I think we need to keep things simpler. I think we are overcomplicating this world as business leaders, whether you're on a service provider or technology provider or a client. There are so many different dimensions to this problem and so many different layers to this fill, and we are very good at, as humans, to overcomplicate everything, and get into each and every nook and corner and say this is not possible, this is not possible, this is not possible. So either we are overly optimistic or we are overly negative. And I think if we as a research and advisory firm can be somewhat the voice of reason, a little bit, keep it simple, as you often say, keep it in plain English, not all of this stuff. I think that's what we should try and achieve, is keep things simpler, because there's a lot of complication in the world, and we as HFS, if we can keep things simpler, I think it'll be good for all of us.
There you go. There's some words of wisdom from Saurabh there. I can't beat that one. So yeah, I'm thinking more about this chief AI officer, because I do think that's a role that is going to become more and more important as we start to see how organizations adopt this. But thanks, everybody. I think we'll have a rerun of this on our website, hfsresearch.com. We'll send a copy of the deck down to all the folks here. And thank you all for your time. And if don't speak to people, have a great end of year. And in 2026, we'll actually get down to the hard work of actually making this stuff real. So thank you very much.
Thank you.